Okay, Moon Knight. Let's do a ramble about Moon Knight. Now, this will have spoilers because I can't help myself, and it's not going to be structured because I don't script my videos, I just ramble. So if you were coming here for a structured review without spoilers, you're in the wrong place. I'm just like some internet nutcase, and that was not meant to rhyme, but it did. Anyway, so, but I'll give my opinion and just like a bit of discussion to start with, and then at some point I'll probably end up going into my own issues if I have time, and hopefully by then we'll have lost the people who, you know, thought that we were talking about normal review stuff, and it'll just be my crew with all the, yeah, we can have a good, fun, crazy time. Okay, so the review part, I've probably already lost some of those people who were here for like a proper review. Okay, never mind that. Let's start with a sort of review of Moon Knight. I thought it was pretty good. I know it's sort of divided opinions, so I guess I should give some background of where my opinion's coming from. I guess the first thing to note is I'm not someone who's into superhero movies. I was when I was little, but I got superhero fatigue really early on, so I think I probably started to drop out around about the first Iron Man movie, or maybe the first few X-Men movies, and then I was like, oh my god, there's too many of these things, I can't keep up, and it's all basically the same idea or formula, or, you know, the things that change aren't enough to keep me interested. So that's how long I've been over the whole superhero thing. So that means I don't really know much about the MCU except like what I see in social media and, you know, cultural discussions, I guess. I also don't read those kinds of comics, so I went into Moon Knight without any idea about what any of the characters are, so obviously I can't be attached to whatever they're supposed to be, because I know some people are upset that things weren't like in the comics or whatever. So that's some background. I came into it not really knowing anything. Okay, another thing about me, I like ancient Egyptian mythology, although that was actually a reason that I didn't want to watch this initially when my brother's like, hey, there's this new thing on Disney Plus, it's got ancient Egypt in it, you might be interested, and I was like, oh god, no, because quite often when people do fiction about ancient Egypt, there's just too much wrong with it that I'm like, or they do something annoying, like, so I never got around to watching the original Mummy movies, and like maybe I've completely got this wrong because I never looked into it enough, but I'm pretty sure they named the bad guy Imhotep, and from memory, Imhotep was like basically this genius in ancient Egypt. Like, he wasn't a pharaoh or anything, he just was really good at his job. He helped come up with ways to build pyramids, or maybe early pyramids, I don't remember, and I think there was some suggestion that he was involved in like early medicine and like early surgery, like, I don't know, stuff like that, but he was so good at his job that the ancient Egyptian people essentially made him into a god, and now you've got some movie that's like, no, he's the bad guy, and I know it's just a name, and I know, like, fiction, blah, blah, and maybe it goes differently and is fine, but I just thought I don't want to watch something like that. Now, I did enjoy Tom Cruise as the Mummy, which I ended up seeing because I saw, like, talk shows talking about the scene in the plane and the plane crash scene, and they actually went up in a plane and were tumbling around, and so I was like, I gotta see that. And I was pleasantly surprised, like, the Egyptian stuff didn't annoy me too much. The one thing that did annoy me, though, is, like, when they find a sarcophagus and they're talking about, like, the lady's like, be careful, it's 5,000 years old, but then later she's looking at the hieroglyphs and is like, oh, it looks like New Kingdom, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure New Kingdom is nowhere near 5,000 years old. That's newer, it's later in, so I'm just like, where's the mismatch here? Aren't you supposed to be some Egyptology expert? Wouldn't you notice that? I don't know. I don't really know. Just like minor stuff like that making me go, oh yeah, okay. But anyway, point being, I thought a Disney Marvel show involving ancient Egypt, that's definitely going to piss me off. And it does, there are a few moments, but, you know. Anyway, no, what got me to watch it is another friend later popped up. I think the day before the finale came out. I didn't even realize that this was a new trending kind of thing, like it was happening right now, and I'm actually like just a week after the finales. Oh gosh, see, that's, I don't want too much of an audience on this video. But anyway, yeah, no, the way he got me to watch it is like, hey, show about ancient Egypt and it's got the split personality thing. Aren't these your interests? And I was like, oh, wait a minute, no one told me the split personality thing. So he sent me a trailer for the last episode, which actually doesn't give anything away, but it apparently is cooler than some of the other trailers. And I was like, okay, I guess I have to watch this then. So yeah, that's what got me into watching it, like convinced me to actually sit down and watch it, despite my like reservations. Superhero movie, ancient Egypt, probably going to be butchered. But then split personality, it's kind of, oh, actually, I kind of have to watch that now, especially because the trailer is just super crazy. And I'm like, I'm down for super crazy. Okay, so yeah, I watched it on last week on Wednesday. I watched 5 episodes in one day and then finished it the next morning. So like I binged this stuff. Anyway, yeah, so some of the background for me, why yeah, I went into this not knowing what I was going to get, really, and that might be why I enjoy it. Some of the guys who are more into the comics and things that are being accurate to a thing, maybe that's why they don't like it. Okay, now with the ancient Egypt stuff, there's a few things that bothered me, like, Khonshu. I mean, for one thing, it took me a while to get that pronunciation right in my head because I'm used to reading it just in text and I don't know how anything's pronounced, but my brain was pronouncing it Khonsu. And then another thing is, like, the moon god. Why would you pick the moon god? I'm not a fan. I mean, especially the moon god, like, the main story I remember from back when I was into that was the reason the moon is dim compared to the sun is because Ra didn't want the sky goddess to give birth, because it was foretold that one of her kids would take over, and so Ra's like, you're not allowed to have kids on any day of the year. And of course she's devastated because she wants to have kids, so she goes to Thoth, Tote, I've heard so many pronunciations, but the god of wisdom, the ibis-headed one, and is like, help me out, what do I do? And he's like, here's what you do. You go and get Khonshu drunk, whatever. You go and get the moon god drunk, and then you gamble with him until he's like completely lost everything and gambles away his light. So she goes and does that, gets the moon god drunk, gambles until he's got nothing left and he has to start gambling his light. And after a while he's lost enough light that she can make 5 new days, or I think the god of wisdom makes 5 new days for her. And because they're technically not part of the year, she's able to give birth on those days. And that's the story that I remember from the moon god. And I'm just like, well, I'm not a fan of this god, but okay, let's go for the fictionalized version. Now, there is one scene that I wonder about. I don't know if this is intentional, okay? But one of the criticisms of Moon Knight is when they go to the Council of Gods to try and be like, hey, this guy's trying to resurrect this evil crocodile bitch. And instead of like giving any evidence, when Khonshu takes over his body to like yell and is super unhinged, I'm like, it would be so much better if they made it clear that this god is just super drunk, because that's kind of like how it came across to me. I guess me knowing the backstory of Khonshu from the ancient Egyptian, like, I don't know if it's part of their universe or whatever, but like the real thing, I was like, wow, he actually kind of looks like that super drunk gambler type who is just off his mind and yeah, is just yelling stuff like, he's doing this, but not giving any proof and not making any reasoned arguments. I was just like, yep, you're just showing how drunk you are. I don't think that was intentional, but that's how my brain explains what went on there, because that scene was just, it was really ridiculous. I mean, the acting was pretty fun because, what's his name? Oscar Isaac, the guy who plays the main character. He somehow manages to make it seem like, yeah, someone's shouting through your voice, but he's still like, what the hell is going on here? I thought that was pretty cool, but yeah, it was a bit of a train wreck of a scene otherwise, but I try and, like, my brain was just like, oh yeah, that's just Khonshu being his usual drunk self. That's why he's so, you know, whatever. Anyway, so the ancient Egyptian thing, other ancient Egyptian things, okay, the inside of the pyramids is absolutely not like that, and there's, I don't know, whatever. I guess we'd just call that a different dimension. It was a bit like, yeah, all right, we're inside the pyramids, pyramid conspiracy, whatever. And I don't know, there's just like bits and pieces like that. And then in the underworld, when they meet the hippo goddess, I'm like, that's an interesting choice because, you know, where's Anubis? who is actually the guide of the dead or whatever. And also, the hippo goddess is not the one who weighs your heart. But, at first I thought that was just, just like, okay, we've got to check before we can take you the rest of the way. But it seemed like actual judgment. And then that was a bit, yeah, okay, all right, whatever. I think the idea is she's supposed to help purify you to get into the underworld, but instead of that, it's like she directs them, yes, you guys have to go and check all this stuff so that you can balance your heart, but if they fail that test, they'd be kicked overboard. And I'm like, okay, all right, we'll just run with that. And then, yeah, the costume that Layla gets when she accepts the hippo's offer to be her avatar, I was just like, how? That's got nothing to do with the hippo. I know the hippo, she's sort of like a fertility goddess and like motherhood goddess, but also has the violent streak because hippos are actually quite violent. And there is, like, the Egyptians knew that, and also that particular goddess also has things to do with the lion and the crocodile, and so there is that like duality between being nice and kind and motherly and trying not to be intimidating, but at the same time fucking shit up basically. But the costume itself, like, does this hippo have anything to do with scarabs? And like the wings made me think more of Mart, which is the goddess of truth, who does have those kinds of wings. And I guess you're weighing your heart against the feather of truth, so maybe you can make us an association there, but it just seemed like, hey, we need to have this really cool costume, let's just do it. Oh, okay, don't know how. I was genuinely expecting her to come out like, oh, I've got a really good costume for her, and I was expecting Layla to end up like, in some chunky suit of armor or something, but no, it's that. Anyway, so that's the Egyptian side of things. Wow, that took me a long ramble. Okay, and then, okay, so I am a little bit suspicious of extreme wokeism, and I'm aware that Disney Marvel is perceived to have a problem with that. I can't confirm because I haven't actually watched any Disney Marvel type stuff in a long while, although I did watch Star Wars and was a bit like, some things I like, some things I do not. With this one though, I've seen the complaints, ooh, another strong female character who's like too much everywhere, blah, blah, blah. But I disagree. I think they actually did her for the most part reasonably well. The role she plays, right, is she plays a few roles, but one of the roles is to help the audience understand what's going on. Because, the first episode, there is a lot of confusing stuff. I understood it, but I think because I've got some background knowledge of a few things going on, but my friend who got me to watch this was like, yeah, I didn't know what was going on in the first episode. So there are confusing things going on, right? So you need an external character to come in and ask the right questions, like, what's going on with you? What's with this dumb accent? Like, what's going on? And so she's sort of helping you figure out what's going on. And like, what other character would you choose besides a wife that he doesn't know about? Like, just a random friend who he's close enough to have had them see that he can transform into a suit. That's a little bit, I don't know, less convincing than a wife that you're with all the time and going on adventures with. And then the alternative, like if these guys complaining about it really hate woke stuff, can you imagine if he was gay instead? The amount that they'd be crying about it. So I think the wife was a good choice. And so yeah, one of her roles is to ask questions and ask some of the questions that the audience has and be the sort of confused, like, what is going on here? Another role that she plays is to move the story forward because, the character himself, he's got dissociative identity disorder and, the Stephen half of that, he has no idea what's going on. And then also the Mark half of that, he's a bit uncertain about how this is going because the dynamic between them has changed, and so there's a lot of chaos going on there and they're struggling with each other, and she has to play the role of like, hang on guys, why don't you try this? Why don't you give Stephen a go? And, she's sort of trying to help them sort out the confusion. And so she's sort of pushing that along. Because otherwise, what's going to happen? He's just going to sit there, like, struggling with himself. I think he needs something external to, like, give that push and convince him to do different things. And then when he's, like, super confused, like, some kind of a guide there, right? So that's another role that she plays. Where it gets a little bit, like, is mainly, like, when they're... What was that? they were trying to find the tomb of Amit or something, and yeah, they get separated, and then there's this big like pit and then the tiny ledge, and she's trying to get across the tiny ledge. That's where it got a little bit like, you know, strong female character kind of stuff, because there's like this zombie chasing her or whatever, and you know, she has a fight with it, and I think, did she put a flare in its eye or something? But then she tried to throw it over the edge and it almost takes her with it, and she's like holding on, and I'm like, I hate when movies do the holding on. Doesn't matter whether you're a male or female, like holding onto a ledge. Very difficult in the middle of an action scene, you know. Like if you were rock climbing, maybe, but that I was just like, oh yeah, here we go, here we go. But that was like what, episode 5? No, episode 4 before they did that, and nope, false alarm, I still have time. Okay, so it was like episode 4 before they finally did something weird with her that I was like, here we go, strong female character stuff. And then they had like, you know, some of her issues come up. But that actually played a role, because then she has to confront him about his role in her dad's death. And so, you know, you get a little bit more of the interpersonal drama there and some character development, and like, you know, she starts doubting stuff. But then they're in that room with the sarcophagus and all that, and he's doing all the work to like get the thing out of the mummy. And when all the bad guys come around with their weapons and stuff, doesn't she mostly hide? Like, she's not there trying to be a badass and trying to, like, you know, throw things above her weight. I mean, you know, the zombie thing. Zombies do kind of have a reputation for being a little bit weak, depending on what universe of zombie we're talking about. But, you know, actual physical guys, yeah, I mean, there's the occasional scene, I think, before that as well, where she, you know, beats up guys who, realistically, she wouldn't. But this is a superhero movie. Nothing makes sense in superhero movies. And yeah, she does seem to hide when she's outnumbered. It's not like she just suddenly goes badass kung fu and, you know, kills them all or anything. So yeah, they are recognizing some of her limits there. And then, yeah, towards the end, once she becomes the Hippo Goddess's avatar, right? I've seen complaints like, how does she automatically know how to use all the weapons and stuff? Keep in mind, she doesn't have the dissociative identity disorder, and so she's not as confused as a person and can probably accept more of the Hippo god's influence and like knowledge and stuff. Like the rest of the council, they all seem to know how to do their jobs. It's just Steve and Mark who were like in super conflict about how it all works. So that didn't bother me so much. But I know there is a scene where like she saves a bunch of kids or whatever, and that actually fits the Hippo Goddess's thing of being a motherly figure. But also before that she's all like, you know, this is just a temporary thing, I'm not going to stay your avatar, I'm not keen on this. But she has to have that sort of superhero moment, and the kid going, are you an Egyptian goddess? Which is a bit lame, but she has to have that, you know, this kid kind of needs me. She needs to have that kind of thing to make her think, maybe I shouldn't give this up, maybe it shouldn't be temporary. I felt like that still, I mean, it does take away a little bit from the whole Moon Knight action scene, but for her own character development, she kind of needs that to realize maybe this is the thing for me. And then she doesn't even save the day. Like, she gets surrounded by some guys with guns, and then she just has to put her wing up and shield herself, because there's nothing she can do at that point. I mean, I don't remember if there's something else that happened in that battle, but she ends up just, like, shielding herself, hiding behind this wing. Like, it's not like I've heard in some other Marvel movies where the girl just saves the day. She doesn't save the day. Stephen, whatever, blacks out and suddenly everyone's dead. Like, that's not her. Which brings us to the dissociative identity disorder thing, although was there one more thing? Oh, another thing on the women, strong female characters. We can't say anything bad about women, you know, anti-woke hysteria. The reason that Mark Steven has dissociative identity disorder is because of an abusive mother. You know, like, they didn't make it the abusive father, they made it the mother. I have seen actually some of them go, wow, I can't believe Disney did this. And I'm like, yeah, maybe because you guys are overreacting and you're letting your bias get a little bit too far ahead of you. Like, I too am suspicious of the over-the-top woke stuff. But I think this was kind of balanced, you know? And so, you know, if you go into it wanting to hate it, you're going to see too much, you know, pro-women stuff. But if you go into it thinking, I'll just see how it plays out, you can see there's balance, you know? And yeah, I don't think Layla was constantly saving the day. I don't know where anyone gets that idea, because especially when it really counts, like, she's just prodding him along most of the time and, like, you know, trying to help him, but there's only so much she can do, and ultimately she can't save the day. She's a supporting character. Whatevs. Anyway, so dissociative identity disorder, that's the next thing. And that's, I'm actually surprised how well they portrayed that. Now, I know there's a few issues I've seen that community. Oh my god, I just hate communities, because they all, whether it's the extreme woke, extreme anti-woke, or, you know, particular mental health groups, all of them annoy me. But anyway, I've seen some of the DID community go, but he was the wrong age when the abuse happened, and I'm like, who cares? Apparently these guys are counting candles on his cake to work out how old he was, and I'm just like, who cares? It's a minor detail compared to every other split personality fiction. What would you prefer? Something where the number of candles on the cake are wrong, or almost every other portrayal of that illness, especially if you prescribe to the whole idea that DID is a real thing and it has these particular presentations. Like, this is the closest you're gonna get. I mean, it's a superhero movie, so you have to make a few changes. I know they probably don't like the idea that one of them is super violent, because they're the first thing you hear when someone analyzes DID fiction like that is like, these people, they're not violent, they're more likely to hurt themselves. I'm like, we get it, but it's a superhero movie. You have to make changes. And I mean, you know, child actors, difficult thing. Maybe they need to get older child actors because they can't find a young enough kid who can portray the right sort of emotions and stuff. Like, you know, you can't just get small children to act the way that you want to. So sometimes you just have to shift the age. I didn't count the number of candles because to me it wasn't that big a deal. And also they're like, oh, it was the mother's abuse that did it to him. And I'm like, okay, hang on. Are you sure that's when his dissociation started? Because remember, before that, he was in a cave, which was flooding, and, you know, his brother drowned, who he was supposed to be looking after. And then, do you remember when that soccer team got stuck in that cave because of flooding? Similar situation, right? How long was Mark stuck in that cave as a kid? On his own, you know, probably terrified, already seen his brother drowning, and then how long before he gets rescued, and how long is he, you know, just like, are we saying that he didn't start dissociating then, that initial traumatic event? You know, if that's the only thing that happened to him, maybe he'd just have PTSD or some other kind of childhood trauma related, you know, mental illness. But like, that's sort of the way I interpreted it at the time. Was, I'm like, oh, that's the thing that started off. But then to make things worse, because, you know, that's a one-off event, I was like, but how would that make him get DID completely? Because that's meant to be prolonged trauma. So that happens. Then to make things worse, his mum blames him, and then she becomes abusive. And so just through his childhood, he's got all that, and he's already, I mean, to me, it just seemed like the first event was the cave incident, followed by the ongoing abuse. And I don't know, to me it just didn't seem like a big deal that his age might have been a little bit off, because I don't even know what age he was when the cave incident happened. Like, was that the same year that we see the cake, or I don't know. I just didn't think that was such a big deal. But the fact that they showed it was a trauma related thing, like, you don't get that in a lot of split personality fiction. I think they tried to do a little bit better with Glass, which I watched and I regret watching. You know, Split was not great either. I wasn't into that because they were all like, oh, it's a superpower. I'm like, oh god. But yeah, no, they sort of made his trauma a bit clearer in maybe the Glass movie rather than the Split movie, but whatever. No, a lot of split personality stuff doesn't even talk about trauma. What, the BBC Jekyll series, that their excuse for why he had a split personality was hide his love. Like, that is the most lame explanation that anyone's ever come up with, and nothing to do with trauma there. So hey, I think Moon Knight did a reasonable job following what I guess is increasingly being accepted about how DID works. And then, the death of the abuser triggering more of his unexpected switches and changing the dynamic between Mark and Stephen, because before that it sounded like Mark had more of his life together and was managing his DID better, but once the mother, the abuser, died, that apparently is a common trigger for, other personalities to start showing and to start processing the abuse. There's a whole bunch of stuff on the internet about this. Whether or not it's reliable, don't ask me. I've still gone through periods where I'm like, is this even a real thing? Especially when you watch some of the YouTube guys and you're just like, you're totally putting this on for views, but maybe they're not. I don't know. Because there does seem to be some studies that prove it. On the other hand, there's people who they specialize, and so of course they're looking for this on purpose, and sometimes I think they're a little bit biased, and there is a theory that at least some DID is caused by therapists pushing it too much and making people come up with different identities and stuff. So yeah, I don't know, but I thought the portrayal was pretty good, and then also like his acting. My gosh, his acting was so good. Oh, another thing about the childhood trauma stuff, right? So one of the things that I've seen criticized is like, if Stephen was created because Mark couldn't handle the abuse, why do we see Stephen, who supposedly doesn't remember any of the abuse, why do we see him, why do we see Mark switch into Stephen just as the mum comes up to beat the shit out of him? Stephen's not supposed to remember any of this, which implies that he wasn't present at the time of the abuse. So isn't that a little bit backwards? And the thing that some of those people don't realize is, how do we know that how do we know that Stephen was the one who took the abuse? Yes, he was there as we saw the mum coming up, but then the door closes and you don't see who actually takes the abuse. And we later find out, and it's hinted throughout the whole series, that there is a third person there. And we find out that this is the super violent one who keeps killing everyone around him when he blacks out in a really difficult situation. So I would say it's probably, is his name Jake? I think it's probably Jake who was taking the beatings from the mum, not Stephen, but Mark didn't really know about Jake, and so he assumed it was Stephen who was protecting him from it, or I don't know, it's kind of a bit screwy, but like, it's meant to be hard to understand. They're trying to understand what's going on. They're trying to fill in the blanks. I mean, Mark and Stephen are. They don't know at this point that Jake exists. Like, there's one point where Mark is fighting some guys and Stephen's like, don't kill them, and then they black out and everyone's like dead, and Mark's like, that wasn't you, was it, Stephen? Stephen's like, no. So they don't really realize that there's a third person there. They don't have any contact. You see in the asylum, the 5th episode, I think, I don't know, whenever they're going through the imaginary death asylum thing, you see a third coffin, or, well, you see a sarcophagus. There was no, so it's the second one. You see the sarcophagus that Stephen came out of, that Mark opened up, I think, but then there's another one that's kind of like a brown sarcophagus, and it's sort of like, there's someone else in there, but no one goes to open it and see who's inside, so they don't know who Jake is at this point. And I wonder if, like, some of these guys, so some of the commentators that I've seen whining about Moon Knight, I think they maybe didn't pick that up, didn't understand that there's more going on there. But yeah, it is a confusing kind of series, because there is that whole asylum thing, and it goes between the psychiatric ward that opens up onto the Hippo God's boat, but then he sort of shifts into another one where the bad guy is the psychiatrist, and you're sort of left wondering which of these worlds is real, because even when he comes back to life, he still goes into that asylum kind of place before he's freed to, wake up in his old apartment. So, like, and I think they're trying to intentionally make you wonder, what exactly is real here? Now, I realize some of apparently this whole story is meant to connect to the MCU, so maybe there's other stuff that I just don't understand in terms of how it connects and how messed up and convoluted that whole universe is. But as a standalone, to me it made sense. Maybe it made more sense to me because I have a bias towards split personality, duality fiction. But yeah, no, I was not confused like some of these guys are confused. Now, I'm just going to check some notes and we'll get into a bit more rambling. Okay, so the final fight, right, where the crocodile goddess Amit, she gets super big from eating souls, and suddenly Khonshu is also really big. Yeah, that's weird. But I think, I mean, the way my brain interpreted it is Amit's been like stuck in limbo for thousands of years at that point, it seems. Alexandra the Great, so maybe 2,000 years. And yeah, so like she's been stuck in stone all that time and needs to be recharged, and I thought that's what was going on. And then when Khonshu was really big, I'm like, okay, I don't know why he's big, but he hasn't been locked in stone for nearly as long. Maybe this is just a thing that Egyptian gods do. A little bit of a weird thing they didn't explain, but I was like, oh, okay. But I've seen some of the commentators be like, you know, why is there suddenly this big battle, and, you know, none of the military are getting excited and none of the other MCU heroes are going, oh shit, what's this? I think the gods were still invisible at that point. Like, why are we assuming that other people can see them? We've already established that no one else can see Khonshu or the jackal dog things. Like, no one can see this unless they're connected to that world somehow. So yeah, I had no problem with the giant fighting things. I mean, it seemed a little bit pointless. I think it was just there to echo the physical fight that was going on the ground between the human characters. But yeah, I just didn't see that as a problem because, well, we've already established that they're invisible. Oh yeah, so I do agree that the hippo goddess needing palm cards was a bit weird, but I'm not sure if that's... I mean, like, you know, she's supposed to be this motherly goddess that you're not supposed to be scared of, and that, you know, uncertainty is a way to make people trust you, and I know I'm probably, like, over-explaining stuff and making too many excuses for them, but when you look at the way that dogs socialize, right, and you have an alpha dog, and then you have the little dogs who are like, oh my god, don't eat me, they tend to act like they'll yawn and they'll be like, I'm small, I'm not a threat, and all that kind of stuff to make the big dog feel better. And you know, it's a way of not being challenging. And so I was just like, is she actually this ditzy as a goddess, despite probably having ferried gazillions of people? And, you know, this could be playing out multiple times, like across multiple universes, because people are always dying. How does one hippo ferry that many people? Maybe splitting the job with Anubis, I don't know, because Egyptian mythology, as much as I'm like, you guys are doing it wrong, it is a bit of a mess. Like, it went for thousands of years, and so there's all these different variations in Egyptian mythology. So, I don't know, but, you know, I just didn't think that was that much of a problem, and it makes for some humor in the show. There's actually a lot of good humor in the show, and you know, do we have to have everything be super serious and like super accurate seeming or whatever? And I thought it was pretty funny when they like all bump into each other and start screaming. I'm like, yeah, this is my kind of fun. So I don't have a problem with that. I've also seen some complaints about when all the avatars for the gods die, why don't their gods appear and, I don't know, cause some shit. But we've established in this world that the gods themselves can't do anything unless they've got an avatar. So before they can do anything, they've got to find a new avatar. And that process, like, it's obviously not an instant thing because Khonshu had to wait for some dying guy to turn up on his doorstep. The hippo goddess had to, you know, get in contact and then wait for the chick to accept the offer. So, you know, it's obviously not that easy to just come up with a new avatar to be able to affect the world. So yeah, why are we upset that they don't appear? They don't need to appear. What are they going to do? Just stand around and look grumpy? I will agree that when the hippo goddess brings the bodies back to life and Layla's just like, okay, I'm not losing my mind, this is actually happening. If that happened to me, I'd be like, yep, I've definitely lost it. I guess though she's sort of been traveling in that magical world and maybe is like, okay, didn't know that could happen, but it's happening, so I'll just go with it. But I also thought it was a lot of fun bringing those dead bodies back to life. Hey, I'm the goddess speaking through these people. I actually really loved it. I love how weird this series is. I love that it's like basically screwing with people's normal ideas of stuff in a fun way, amusing way. It made enough sense to me. I don't need every little detail to be explained to me. Yeah, as I said, I didn't mind the lack of like actual Moon Knight action because I don't know, to me that's one of the least interesting parts, is just like people in costume beating each other up. So yeah, I mean, I get if you are into the superhero thing, I get that you want to see some more superhero action, but I think the main draw of this movie is not the superhero stuff, it's more the character driven stuff and the weird stuff that he's dealing with, you know? So yeah, I was actually relieved that there's not too much superhero stuff. Although, like, I didn't understand the Mr. Knight stuff, so when Mark turns into a thing, he's actually like a badass superhero. When Steven tries to do it, he's just like in this suit, and I'm like, okay, bit weird. Not sure if you have different powers or whatever, but that was a bit odd. I guess, you know, it's only a 6 episode thing, so there's only so much they can explain, and they, I think, rightly focused on more of the weird character stuff and him trying to figure out what's going on. And so I'm apprehensive about a season 2. Like, I really enjoyed this season, but I think if a season 2 comes up, there's a lot less inner conflict because he's already made friends with one part of himself. I mean, there's the other part of himself, but I just, so far from what I know about that character or have learned about that character, I don't see the same dynamic of inner struggle, which is what I'm personally into. And then also in a second season, I just feel like they, like, because there's less of that interesting stuff to go on, they probably would do more superhero action, at which point I'm going to lose interest. So I'm actually hoping they say there won't be a season 2 just so I can stay here and not have to see that and not, you know, lose interest. But, you know, it's Disney Marvel and they're not designing movies for me, obviously. Oh gosh, and this idea that they're trying to create a female Moon Knight, or that she's taken things over. I've already addressed that, but like, I mean, maybe they'll spin off her character and then she can just have her own show. Why not? I mean, she's not particularly interesting except as a bouncing board for the Moon Knight character, but hey, you know, if they want to create new characters, I think she's based off like a male character from the comics though, so yeah, I'm not sure how that would go. And also, if she does decide to keep the wings, that's another reason that I would be a little bit apprehensive about watching a season 2, because I don't need 2 superheroes running around saving kittens or whatever. I'm just not into that. Yeah, so I don't know. Oh yeah, how does she know how to do the binding spell? Because she's possessed by a god, duh. Like, how did the rest of the Egyptian god meeting group, like, how did they know what to do? They were doing it while actively possessed by the gods, and, you know, obviously they all communicate with their gods who can tell them how to do all these ceremonies, regardless of how long they've been together, you know. So people getting upset about that, I don't understand. Something I do agree with is, why the hell did the bad guy put glass in his shoes? I wonder if there's some like deleted scenes there, because it opens, the whole series opens with him putting glass in his shoes, and you're like, okay, that's weird, and it makes me feel like, oh, that's horrible. But it only comes back once, and that's when he, when the main character like realizes that everything's not real. Oh, I think it's after he beats the bad guy, and you know, he goes back into that psychiatry mental world kind of thing, and yeah, suddenly the psychiatrist version of the bad guy has blood leaking from his shoes. That's the only time that the glass comes back, and I'm just like, I do feel like that was a bit of a weird thing. I mean, they do foreshadow stuff in this, like when in the first episode when Steven is doing inventory or whatever, and like, you know, he's got a crate of hippos, and that's sort of alluding to the hippo goddess later on. Side note, I really love that he's a nerd, and in the beginning is like, hey, so you've got this exhibition, and I noticed that this poster is not 100% accurate. I'm like, yeah, I'd probably do that. Or I'd, you know, at least be thinking it, if I noticed something like that. I like that he's a nerd, but then, yeah, no, the hippos are there early on, and then they come back later. So then we've got the bad guy with his glass shoes, no mention of it in between, no signs that his feet are bleeding, but then back in the mental world of Mark and Steven, suddenly it comes back, and it's just a bit, I don't know, that was a weird thing. I don't know what significance that had. I guess, like, you know, he hates himself for having not like for having been a bad person and not having bad scales, and he thinks that maybe suffering will make him more attractive to Amit. Oh, speaking of, why does Amit accept him when his scales don't balance? And I think that's a sign of her as an actual evil god. Instead of just, being evil on the basis that she wants to minority report everyone and judge them before they've done something, she's showing her hypocrisy. She's saying, okay, all these guys, if their scales are not balanced, I'm just going to eat them straight away. That's the end of them. But then she finds one who's useful, and she actually explains, like, I've had all these servants there who had their scales balanced and they just keep failing me. She's sort of realizing that she needs some of those unbalanced people to do her dirty work. She says that, and she shows that she's a hypocrite, and she's just sort of using this as an excuse to eat more souls ahead of their time, I thought that was an indication of her character rather than them just trying to do plot convenience, So, like, she's actually worse than what she's portrayed. Like, it's cool when bad guys think they're doing the right thing, and I think the main bad guy, he actually thinks he's doing the right thing and he's trying to atone for his scales being unbalanced. But this goddess she's actually worse than what he realizes even. And so that's what I read from that. I've seen criticism of Layla's character not having enough to her, and I don't know where that comes from, because obviously she's been in a relationship with this guy and they're into the ancient Egypt stuff. So I don't understand why people think she's got no character, and that was just one of the weirder things that I saw come up. I don't know, just like she was clearly invested in his adventures before the series starts. Like, we start the series with Stephen going, what's going on? We don't really follow Mark's story, even though he turns out to be like the original. Although if you follow DID circles, they say there's no original, everyone's an alter, blah blah blah. But I think technically, Stephen is based on a fictional character, but he's not quite the same as that fictional character. So I've seen some people go, is he a fictive? I think not really. He's just inspired by that character, but he ends up being his own person. Anyway, let's not get into the DID terminology. Oh my god, I've been talking for way too long. But she's clearly been part of his journey already. So it's not like she comes out of nowhere. They've already had some drama, which we start finding out about. And I don't know, were these guys even paying attention when they watched this? Anyway, then another thing, I'm actually going through a transcript of a video. That's why I'm probably jumping between things. So the part where, he's standing over the bad guy about to kill him, and then Steven's like, nah, and then they're sort of struggling. Oh, I don't remember exactly, but for some reason they don't want to kill the bad guy and destroy Amit forever. And then Khonshu's like, do it, and he's like, no, and then Khonshu fucks off. And some of the questions are like, why didn't Khonshu just kill him then? And I mean we've established that these gods can't do anything without a human avatar, and at the time Mark and Steven are in control. So that's why Khonshu has to wait until those guys are out and asleep, or whatever, dormant, and Jake's out, and Jake is the one that I hope his name's Jack or Jake, the violent one. Khonshu has to wait until that personality comes out before he can actually finally kill the bad guy and get rid of. That's in the between credits scene. He has to wait until that moment before he can finally kill the bad guy, because the other two have said, we don't want anything to do with this, we don't want anything to do with you, maybe. But the catch is the third personality hasn't abandoned Khonshu, and so he's still hanging around, and that's how Khonshu plans to do stuff. So, he disappears at the moment because he couldn't do anything then, but then later comes back and does what he wants to using the avatar, because that's what he has to do. I don't know what was confusing about that for some of these guys. Ooh, I also really like that there was so much Egypt in it, and actually the girl being actually Egyptian. I think that's kind of fun. I guess I can see some of the virtue signaling, whatever, that people are going to complain about, but why not do it? It fit the story, if it's sort of shoehorned in there out of nowhere, okay, But part of the story is he's actually in Egypt to come across the statue of Khonshu to become his avatar, and then still be hanging around there to meet an Egyptian woman who becomes his wife. And like, to me it makes sense. So yeah, I don't have any complaints about that. I think I've heard the director might be like heaps Egyptian representation, but like, why not? Why not have just one movie that does it? Like, I get that sometimes the woke stuff goes over the top, but you can have those stories sometimes and not make it over the top and annoying. So that didn't bother me. I actually thought it was kind of cool. Crap, and now I've gone on too long. I think those are all of the thoughts that I had about it, at least related to the actual movie, but I don't know how much time I have to do my own little ramble, so maybe I need to stop. But yeah, so this has been sort of a review, discussion, disjointed ramble, and yeah, I'm sorry I didn't get up to the part where I wanted to get up to. That's okay. Okay, so it's sort of... I'm just trying to listen to whether or not I still have the house to myself. Maybe I'll just quick go check. Okay, it's just construction across the road, so that's fine. We can talk for a little bit more, I think. I don't know when I'm gonna... Okay. Oh, quick update on my health is, like, my ECG and my blood test came back fine. So as far as we know, my problem with dizziness was just to do with my ears and my hay fever. But I think spraying the antihistamine and it's got a corticosteroid in it as well. I think it made me like really badly depressed last night, or like triggered me into that. So that's not fun. And my heart rate is still going way higher than it really should. But I don't know if that's partly anxiety as well. So that's just a quick update on my health for like viewers of my channel. if anyone who isn't a regular on my channel has gotten up to this point and suddenly I'm talking about myself instead of Moon Knight, yeah, I'm sorry, this is how things go. But yeah, something I wonder about, the heart rate thing, right, may connect into Moon Knight, because I've actually been super, like, psychologically stressed since watching this. Not because of anything that they've done wrong, but the split personality theme is very much my thing, and I don't know if you can see back here somewhere. So I've got the Mummy, I've got Venom, I've got Fight Club. You sort of get, there's a little bit of a theme going on. Even Minority Report's there, because the character has an inner struggle of like, it's been foretold that I'm going to do this thing. Why would I ever do such a thing? Am I actually that sort of a person? Like, any of that kind of inner conflict really gets me, and I think it's because I find it relatable. So since I got my schizoid diagnosis, and perhaps as far back as when I went to my last psychologist and tried to talk about some of this stuff, and she was super disappointing, I think maybe as far back as then, I actually haven't watched much split personality fiction, and I think I've accidentally kind of avoided it, especially since my SPD diagnosis. I just couldn't get myself to watch any of that stuff. And the thing that happens when I watch these kinds of things is it does trigger that part of me that thinks I have a split personality, which, I mean, I still don't even know if I entirely believe in the diagnosis as a thing. And I'm quite certain it's just a thing that I've made up. It's a character that I made up a long time ago, and I used to write a lot of stories. I don't know why this one character won't go away and has been stuck in my head for like decades at this point. But yeah, so watching these types of fiction does kind of trigger that in me. And so when I saw the trailer and I could sort of start feeling it to go, I was like, ooh. But I have to watch it, because once it starts up, it will just like keep putting the pressure on until I actually watch the thing, and it sort of like perpetuates itself. But I watched the first episode of Moon Knight, and there's plenty of split personality stuff going in there, especially when he blacks out and suddenly everyone's dead around him. Like, that kind of violent split personality stuff especially gets my brain going. And so I hope I'm not being too confusing. But yeah, so after that first episode, I thought, like, I didn't have any reaction. I wasn't triggered. I was just like, oh, maybe it's fine. Maybe I can watch this kind of fiction without going into nutcase territory. And so I watched the next two, then I think, had dinner and whatever, and then I watched, so I ended up watching 5 episodes that day. But as I was going to bed, that's when it finally started to happen. Is the first thing that happened to me is I started to get really bad derealization. And at that point I thought, one of the reasons I avoid fiction is because it makes the real world so much boring by comparison, and it kind of hurts to go into a fantasy world and then come back to this reality and just be like, oh my god, I'm still stuck here. So I thought the derealization was just that, like, nothing in this world is real. Like, I was just having that sort of, oh my god, nothing's real, what's going on? But then when I did my night routine and sent my dog to bed, as soon as my dog left the room, that's when I got more of the, I guess, depersonalization, and I've sort of started to split off from myself, and that character started to come out of me. And I don't remember exactly how it went, but it was difficult, and I was like, oh shit. Here we go again. It's been months where I haven't had to deal with this part of my psychology, and then I watch Moon Knight and all of a sudden, bang. One of the good things about it is that part of me, whatever it is, it does help me get more energy. And so that night I did twice as many push-ups as I usually do. To be fair, I usually only do 5 push-ups, and so I did 10. And then yeah, so the next day I had planned to go into my art studio, and but obviously that part of me is like, nah, gotta watch the last episode. I only found out that night that there was only one more episode to go. I thought this was going to be a long series, but no, it's only 6 episodes. So yeah, that part of me was like, nah, gotta finish this series. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to, I have to go to the studio at a particular time, because if I go too late I miss out on my rice paper roll, because they often sell out. Well, one time I was late and they'd sold out, and I was so confused. I didn't know what to do. I just went back home rather than buy something different, because yeah, my brain was just like, oh no, this is not the plan, what do I do? So I was like, nah, I've got to be at the rice paper roll place by this time. And I also want to walk my dog earlier in the day, and this is also the time, the only time that we could watch it is this particular kind of time. So everything has to be done by then, otherwise not watching the last episode of Moon Knight. And so that part of me, that energy or whatever, was like, okay, great, well, just wake up early, walk the dog early. I think I walked the dog before I even had breakfast, and then I was all dressed and ready to go, and then once I had the house to myself, watched the last episode of Moon Knight, and then I was able to get to the studio on time. And like, okay, I realize I might be sounding a little bit crazy because I'm essentially like talking to myself or manipulating myself. That's what happened, is I used that part of my psychology and just got more done. And then even at the studio, oh, okay, let's go. I don't want to seem like I'm crazier than I am. I get that this is all just in my head, probably stuff that I've made up, and I don't understand why I can't grow out of it. I thought I had grown out of it at one point, but apparently not. The last time I got really badly depressed, it had been gone for a while, and it was gone for ages, and I thought, I'm finally done. That's why I didn't tell my psychiatrists at the time that this is another issue I have. Because I thought I was over it, but then it came back, and it's sort of been on and off since then. It always does this, is I'll think I've grown out of it, and then something will happen and it'll come back, and then I have spent... So one of the reasons I'm just like screwed up is I've spent the past week, especially like right after watching it, and it sort of went down, and then I got physically ill and I thought it had gone away, but then it's come back again. I've just, like, it's really preoccupying. It makes it hard to think about anything else. And I had to keep distracting my mind to stop it from, like, making me just go nuts. And then, it sort of changes... It tries to change the way that I act and things about my, like, facial expression and just things about the way I'm experiencing the world. I don't know how to explain it because I'm already like to almost an hour of talking. But like, so there's some, what bothers me, like if this was just something that I made up and just an obsession, or like, schizoids I know have inner world stuff, but this is affecting my physical body and like it's trying to affect the way that I interact with the world, and I'm just like, what is that? There's something else going on here. Is it an adrenaline thing? And like with my heart rate being all over the place, especially since watching Moon Knight, yeah, it's still I don't know, it feels like it's going faster than it is, and then sometimes it actually is going fast, like at the doctor's when it was over 100 for no reason. Um, the physical aspects of that, that's what bothers me, because if there's those effects going on, then it's not just in my head, it's in my body as well. Um, yeah, I don't know. Uh, Now, I the other thing is it made me watch a lot more DID and OSDD stuff, like all those YouTubers who I find some of them are okay, and then some of them are just super sensationalist, and I don't know what to think. Like maybe some of them are legit, maybe some of them are just doing it for views. But there's one who is very suspicious, who she's put out a video of like a demon altar, and I'm just looking at it going, oh my god, I used to make YouTube videos almost exactly like that, because I used to let that part of me sort of take over and make videos and just, and then there's a huge period of my life where I tried to like integrate it into my life, and it's such a huge part of my life. It's influenced so much stuff. It's why I went into music, why I tried to go into art, why I learned to growl even, why I tried dating. That was that part of me. And then we can get into the third split in my head, which was, as far as I know, a temporary split. It hasn't come back, but like, because dating is not who I am, I like split off a third persona, which huge people who've been watching me on YouTube for the longest will know I called M3 as like the third version of me, although I also like came up with a sort of M0 at one point, which was just like me observing everything about me. That must have been a real derealization thing in hindsight. I didn't know what derealization was at the time. No, depersonalization. The words get confusing. But anyway, yeah, no, the M3 thing was the part of me that was in the relationship, because I'm not a romantic person. So, and I remember the day that happened as well. Like I was crossing the road, and then all of a sudden, like my brain did a thing, and I almost like fell over as I was crossing the road. It was really bizarre. And yeah, I think that without trying to sound too crazy, because I don't even know if I believe my own bullshit, but the other part of me, which is the darker, like it's sort of a more classic Mr. Hyde-ish kind of thing. I mean, that's what Destroyer is and Destroy America. That's the two parts of me. That's how embedded in my sense of self this is, that my channel was named after it. And I started this channel more than a decade ago, so this isn't a recent thing. I've just been trying to push it away. I've been like, no, it's all bullshit. I was just making it up. But anyway, so I think that part of me, it's sort of like it invented that third persona because it was curious about, you know, dating someone, because the guy that I first dated was actually kind of open to the idea that that part of me was real, and he kind of encouraged it. And oh god, all the shenanigans, don't let me get into that right now because this will go forever. I'm trying to keep it under an hour, but I don't know if I'll make it. But yeah, so I don't talk about this stuff because I think it's stupid and I feel vulnerable about it, and yeah, I don't want to come across as crazier than I am, but this is the thing that's actually happening in my head. But anyway, that I used to talk about this part of me as a she, but I'm trying not to humanize it. I'm trying to just call it because I'm trying not to encourage it or humor it in any way. I've seen like some of these dissociation specialists saying that you should, like, you know, just try and talk to those parts in your head, and, you know, maybe they'll say stuff. And I'm like, no, that's how you encourage it. If it's not real and you tell me to talk to it, it's going to become real because you've told me to. Whereas if I don't humor it, it has less chance to become, I don't know. I just sort of disagree with that approach because it'll make a lot of people think they have DID or OSDD when they don't. OSDD is like partial DID. It depends on which system you use to diagnose things, but it's like dissociative identity disorder, but either the parts aren't well defined or there's no memory loss. I don't have memory loss, so according to that system, I would have OSDD 1B or just partial DID if we take them seriously and if we take my own shit seriously. And that's what I've been trying to figure out, is like, all this bullshit, can I fit it into SPD, schizoid personality disorder, because there is a strong fiction kind of thing in there, or fantasy world kind of thing, and for some reason mine's not actually, I don't go into an internal world, but I have this weird thing going on. Can I fit that into that? SPD being on the schizophrenia spectrum. Is this some kind of like mild psychosis that I have? I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. And I've just been too insecure to talk about it. But here we are, because it's just a little bit too much. I had a really terrible night with depression, so I'm trying to think about something else. Anyway, wow, I've gone getting off topic. But so that part of me, the other part of me, wanted to try dating because this guy could see it, and was like, taking it seriously, and it's desperate for validation. It's, you know how Deadpool knows that he's a fictional character? Most characters don't know this. So if this is a character in my head, it doesn't realize that it's not real. So it wants to be recognized and validated, and he was giving it that. And so that's why I think it wanted to push me into that relationship, but I don't care about relationships, so I think it created the third persona. And there was an incident where my ex got tired of my second persona and was like, can you just like put a lid on it? And I went dead cold, like super, the normal overt schizoid thing. I could not show him any affection and all that, and he realized, and he's like, oh shit, can you bring that one back, because, you know, I want you to be affectionate. That was bizarre. There's so much that like I'm remembering now because of Moon Knight. Like I had forgotten a lot of this stuff happened, and now all the memories are back because my brain's thinking about it. And like when your brain thinks about one thing, it sort of lights up the other pathways that make you go, oh shit, that happened too. There's a book called The People We Are, which is about how your memories connect to each other, and when you're closer to one memory, you remember more stuff to do with that. But if you go to another memory, you remember less of that and more of the other thing. Maybe explains why when you're depressed you only remember, it's easier to remember bad stuff compared to good stuff, whereas when you're happier it's easier to remember good stuff just because where your mind's at. That's how I'm trying to think of things rather than the whole DID stuff, but whatever, because, you know, that second persona is quite different from how I see myself, I guess, and then the third persona. And what's interesting is when my second persona fucked off after like I'd even gone into, like, after dating my ex, and I dated some other guys, and I actually looked into the BDSM world, because if that's a violent part of me, maybe it's just that. Maybe I'm just, like, in denial, and maybe I do want a relationship, and maybe it has to be this weird fetish stuff. So I went to, they call them munches, so it's not like the actual stuff, it's just they go to a pub, they all look mostly normal, and they just talk about stuff. Those are the events that I went to, and just tried to sort of suss that out, but they say they're open to asexuality, but they're so not. They're like, sex is in everything. And there's one I went to where this lady who was like a mistress, she showed me these pictures of what she'd done to her dude, and I was like, oh, I did not need to see that, but I was pretending to be polite, so I'm like, yeah, that's cool, I guess. And I'm not even going to tell you what it is, because it was just like, maybe you should have warned me before showing me that stuff. Anyway, so that's like, yeah, I was trying to sort of integrate the different pieces of me. So me as I think I am most of the time, me as that destroyer mode thing, and then the third version of me that was capable of dating, trying to bring that all into one package didn't work well. The second part of me eventually like realized that that wasn't good enough. You know, it's hard to explain. Long story short, it just wasn't good enough. One day that part of me just like fucked off, and I was like, oh, what do I do now? Only came back one more time after that, and then left me, and then I don't remember if that was before or after my grandparents died and I got super badly depressed. But I think my depression was worse because I didn't have that part of me, like, that it's made up such a huge part of my life, you know, like trying to find ways to fit that craziness into life. And I once that part of me stopped being relevant, I didn't know what to do with myself. I was just sort of floating. It was really bizarre, and I mean, I thought I had finally gotten over it, and like it was really difficult because I didn't know how to define myself anymore, but on the upside, like, it let me explore different things in my art, because up to that point in my life it was super preoccupying. Like, if I tried to write a song, I would try to incorporate some kind of split personality issue in there. And, you know, when you're so focused on just one thing all the time, it limits your creativity. So when I went to art school during that depression without that influence, I was actually able to explore more stuff, but I never figure out, you know, who am I without this piece of me? So when it came back, it was a bit of a shock, because then I finally had to admit that maybe I didn't make this up. Maybe this is a part of my psychology. I don't know. but also it's never been as strong as it used to be because I don't humor it in the same way. And now, where was I going? I've sort of lost my train of thought. Oh dear. uh, yeah, no, now I think what worries me more is I've finally accepted that I do have some childhood trauma from growing up with a disabled brother. And, in the past, I was like, there's no way I could have anything like DID because I haven't had trauma. But now I'm like, oh shit, I have kind of had trauma. Like SPD has made me admit that. And so now, do I look more at the dissociation stuff? Because I realize I do get derealization and depersonalization at least. Sometimes I'll be talking to someone and I notice, like, I keep talking as normal. I keep talking about the same stuff, but I sort of notice that I'm like separate from myself and just watching myself do the thing. It's a very bizarre experience. And then, yeah, also when I go out and just like everything feels unreal, I think some of that is because I'm more isolated. I'm not getting out into the real world enough. And I'm not being stimulated enough by the real world. So, maybe it's just that. Maybe I don't know. I don't know to what extent I used to have these things before, but yeah, no, there's lots of ways that my sense of self is screwed up, and maybe I should make a separate video on that. But on this front, yeah. So Moon Knight just brought up all the whole DID thing again, and trying not to watch too much of that. I think I've gotten through the like initial whatever, but I'm actually going to go and see Firestarter with a friend tonight because I'm tired of sitting on my butt, and I think maybe the nose spray is making me a bit more depressed, so I'm like, I just need to get out. I'm not as dizzy today. I still have the weird chest feelings and the heart rate thing, but I just need to get out of the house, and we've been wanting to see that movie for a while, and I know there's a good chance it's going to trigger me some more into this Destroy America kind of thing, so a bit nervous about that, but my friend knows a little bit about some of the stuff that goes on in my head, so it's probably better that I go see it with her and she can just keep me from being a nutcase. If I'm around people, I generally don't show that crazy part of me. I think if I ever did accept it and try to talk to it and try and be friendly with it, I think that would like defeat the purpose. I feel like part of what's up with me is I have to have that kind of struggle, otherwise it doesn't mean anything. But also I don't know, despite my suspicions that it's just bullshit in my head, I don't understand why, knowing that it's bullshit, why does it stick around? Why doesn't it just disappear if I know it's not real? Anyway, so this has been a little bit of a ramble, and it's probably not very well structured because I'm just saying whatever, and I've probably missed some stuff, and God help me watching a 1-hour video back just to make sure I'm not too embarrassed. I don't know, but thanks for watching, and I hope you don't think I'm too crazy. Like, I'm trying to find ways to not make this a split personality thing, because yeah, I'm suspicious of the whole thing, but yeah, so there's some things my brain does. That's some of the stuff that I've been stressing about lately because it's suddenly become an issue. Interestingly, when it hasn't been triggered or isn't present or whatever you want to call it, I tend to forget how badly it affects me. And so that's another reason sometimes I don't talk about it, because unless it's happening right now, I forget what it feels like. And I just forget that it's something that stresses me out. So it's only now that I am stressing out that I can really properly address it, like talk about it or whatever, but I do still have that insecurity. And so all you guys who followed me for SPD, I do wonder if there's more going on with me, but yeah. I will get annoyed though if someone leaves a comment just saying, oh, this totally fits SPD, because you know it doesn't. There's more going on. Like, I hate when people just interpret everything I do from an SPD lens now. It's almost better that you didn't know what my disorder is, because then you wouldn't really... I don't know, anyway. Okay, I made the video. Great. I am a little bit crazy, in the sense that I can't function in the world properly, and I'm tired of people telling me I'm not crazy. You're just neurodiverse and the world isn't set up for you. Okay, great, but the world isn't going to change. This is the world I have to live in. I need to find a way to work within this world, which means I probably need to try and change some of my thinking somehow, otherwise I'm not going to survive. So stop telling me I'm neurodiverse and then I'm not crazy, because clearly I am. I'm 33 years old, shock horror, and yeah, I've made a complete mess of my life, so Okay, so just gotten back from seeing Firestarter. We might as well chuck that in here as well. Like, why not? Because there's not a lot to say about it. It's not a good movie. It's super predictable. It's slow paced. The music's not great. It's just like it's something that anyone could sit down and write with that premise. Like, there's nothing clever going on. I don't know what the book's like. I assume the book is better, but yeah, it was just like, eh. And I've seen Carrie, right? You know, I think it was the remake like a few years back, and that I enjoyed. Firestarter, I was just like, it's okay, but like, it's not that exciting. And so, do you care about spoilers? Because it's just basically, so what did I write? The overall story is girl has powers, struggles to control them. The whole family gets found out by some shady organization. They go on the run. Girl learns to use her powers. There's a showdown in the facility. The end. Like, that's literally the movie, and it's just like, I don't know. It's just lacking something to keep you interested. I don't know. Do I have more thoughts about that? I think I better get changed out of this, and I was making some tea, so give me a moment. With the power of editing, I will be right back. Okay, we're back in fluffy pink fairy mode, which I'm hoping is about as far as we can get from the Destroyer vibes as possible. I was sort of just looking at that picture and, with the spikes and all that, and thinking, that, even the way I dress, that part of how I dress, that's influenced by that same part of me. Now, I'm not sure what the furry stuff is about. I think it's just because it's cute. And so, I don't know, maybe the part of me that's a little bit more Japanese. And although Japan has a lot of weird, creepy stuff, so maybe I can't rely on that either. I don't know. Japan's interesting because, you have to act a particular way to people's face, but as my mum says, then people would just stab you in the back. So it's almost like Japanese culture is set up for that sort of duality, and maybe there's something cultural subconsciously going on in there as well. But anyway, so Firestarter, probably what you're wondering is, did I get triggered? It's a bit of a tricky question because the elements that I would usually go for in that sense, they're just not present. Like, she has a little bit of a struggle with herself, and she's like, I'm a monster, but she kind of doesn't struggle with it that much. And then there's a point where she's like, I mean, this is all in the trailer. There's a point where she's like, actually, it felt kind of good, but it doesn't have any impact. I think they didn't really show enough of that, or like the way that they tried to show it just didn't hit well. And I'm someone who is like very biased to be lenient towards that kind of stuff, and for me it was just like, so what? There's a few moments where, like, bad things happen, but it just was like, don't care. So, with that kind of stuff, I'm not sure. Did it trigger me? I don't know. Okay, so to cut to the chase, yeah, I'm sort of struggling a bit with that part of me, like, even as I'm making this video, and that's one of the reasons to just change my appearance instead of try and stay in this mindset, because like on the bus I was like, I wonder if I should, throw in a little bit of conversation at the end of this video, seeing as I didn't get to finish editing it before I left to go see it. So, but while I was thinking of it and trying to think, okay, what would I say, my brain started going into this thing of like imagining me taking on that persona and making the video, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. If that happens, I'm going to edit it out, because I'm just, like, I haven't really, I've avoided slipping into it as much as I can. I'm not always successful, but at least I can avoid it on screen. Okay. So yeah, like, I am in that sort of mental state, but was it because of the movie, or was it just because I'm already like that, there's that level of and so I'm not really sure. I think maybe when I was younger, something like this might have had a bit more impact, because I was more paying attention to like destruction could set it off, like natural disasters, those kinds of documentaries, even air crash investigation, those things used to set it off. These days it has to be more of the duality, inner struggle kinds of fiction. I realize that I'm doing the pause thing and being all like, hey guys. Yeah, so the whole thing about where she can set things on fire in this that should have appealed to me in the past, but these days it doesn't have the same impact, especially because I'm just like not humoring that. It's more the inner struggle. Perhaps that's because that's more relevant to my current psychological situation. I don't know. It's almost midnight. I'm a bit out of it still because, you know, I'm not 100% well physically. But anyway, so yeah, the fire aspect didn't really do much for me, but it should have in the past, and I've lost my train of thought. Wow. Uh, so, what was I talking about? Just getting a bit distracted. Um, yeah, no, I don't know how much the impact the movie itself had, and I just need to pause for a second. Okay, so when the movie ended, I was just like, I don't feel anything. Like, I also saw The Northman before I saw Moon Knight, like a couple weeks. I don't remember. I saw The Northman. That's the one with you know, the Vikings and volcanoes and stuff, and that was pretty meh. And you know, it's just like things happening on screen, and I didn't really feel anything for it. Okay, The Northman was better than this movie, I think, because at least it has one kind of twist, but otherwise both movies didn't really have an impact on me. So at the end of this movie, and I went talked to my friend, I was like, is it just me not being able to feel stuff, or did you think that that was a bit flat as well? And she agrees with me, it's kind of a flat movie. So it's not just the fact that I've run out of feelings as a human, you know, the whole schizoid depression, that combo. No, it's actually a kind of crap movie. But so after that, we kind of, sorry, I'm getting a little bit distracted again. So what happened? Yeah, after the movie, we just sort of walked around the shops a bit, and then I helped her find the way to get back to her car. And then as we parted ways, I was originally going to get an Uber home, but then when I looked on my app, it was the, you know, public transport times are actually really fast at night because I guess there's no traffic, there's not a lot of people. So I decided to take the bus, and I think that's where I started to lose it a bit because I was on my own, you know, not being distracted by the social interaction. And so walking to the bus stop was fine. Waiting at the bus stop was okay. But once I sat down on the bus and I couldn't look at my phone anymore because I just get a little bit of that motion sickness. And so I was just sitting there and my brain starts doing its thing when it's not distracted. And yeah, wow, I started to, so I was imagining like making this video and uh you know, imagining, yeah, I was starting to like just sort of get a bit out of it. And there was one point where like I realized what was happening and was trying to like sort of just get myself back, you know, out of the crazy mode. And I think I was just sort of like staring dead ahead. But I had the spike, so like, you know, people are just sort of avoid you if you look a bit weird anyway. And yeah, there's not too many people anyway. But yeah, there's this lady who sat in front of me, and I just sort of became aware of like I was just staring, and I probably came across as a little bit weird than I normally do, but that's fine. I don't mind seeming weird out in public because if it means people leave me alone, that's bonus, right? I say as I sit here in a pink fluffy hat. But yeah, and then once I got off the bus, so way back when all this stuff was a bigger issue for me, I used to like go on night walks, because that part of me is just more sensory. Like I just become more aware of stuff, like, you know, sounds, the feeling, especially the feeling of like air on skin and like cold and you know, a lot of those kinds of sensations that I just wouldn't notice normally, they just sort of become a little bit more bright. And so I ended up walking kind of slowly home and like touching stuff, which is the thing I used to do. And I was just like, well, look, I'm just walking home. It's not a big deal. It's not too cold out. So yeah. And no one's watching, so it's fine. No one will know except who I tell on YouTube. So yeah, it took me a little bit of a while to get home. But once I got in the door, you know, the dogs come and talk to me, so that's okay. But now I'm talking to myself in the webcam, and yeah, anyway, so I better go to bed, but I just thought I'd add that in there because some of you might be curious about how did it go. Also, I do not recommend this movie. Save your money, save your time, go see something else. And then if you're one of these people who was upset with Moon Knight because you don't like Disney wokeness or whatever, or you had some criticism of the story, well, it's still better than Firestarter, isn't it? And that's hopefully all I have to say for tonight, because this video is way too long and I'm tired, and probably, I know I'm hesitating to stop the video, but I think once I turn it off it's going to be a little bit harder to just keep myself grounded. I've heard that like when you're dissociating you're supposed to like try and use your senses to like bring yourself back to yourself and to reality and all this kind of stuff. The problem for me though, maybe that would work for derealization, but when it comes to this like thing with my sense of self, because that other part of me is more sensory, I feel like that's just going to backfire. And that's one of the problems I've had with meditation, is like if I quiet my mind, what do you think fills the gap? It's not silence, it's a different part of my brain going, you beauty, we're in. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I avoid mindfulness, apart from the feeling that all it does is try and push my problems away instead of solving them. If I happen to be in this sort of a mood, I just bring something else out. And so, yeah, I'm sorry, I've made myself seem crazy, but then so have the hats. Do I have a furry personality? Oh god, let's not go there. I'm gonna end this video before I hurt myself. Bye guys.